What's the scariest true story you've heard or told? One day as a kid I was exploring the forests near our house with my cousin. The forest was on a hill, but there were several craters there because of bombs that were dropped there during the World Wars. Germany. One day we saw a backpack at the bottom of one. We tried to climb down, but it was kinda steep and slippery, so we didn't want to risk falling. We planned on returning later with a rope, and went home. The next day news story was that there was a backpack found with the remains of a girl in that forest. A guy walking his dog found it after the dog wouldn't stop barking and going crazy at the edge of the crater while staring at the backpack. We stopped exploring the forests after. You just got saved from being haunted by a memory for your whole freaking life. So grateful for that. The bag even looked like it hasn't been there that long, still looked new. That's why we wanted to get it. We thought that maybe someone accidentally dropped it in there. To think that the person that dumped it there could have been still nearby. That's terrifying. It made me nauseous thinking about what you would see if you got down into that crater. When I worked in healthcare I had a patient who got a sinus infection. He stopped taking his antibiotics after a few days because he felt better. His sinus infection came back with a vengeance. When he got to the emergency department he was presenting with stroke symptoms. The infection had spread to his cranial cavity. There was so much pus that it was twisting his brain. No one thought he would survive the surgery. The family was advised to expect the worst. Amazingly he actually survived. He ended up needing 3 more surgeries to wash out and spent almost 2 months in the hospital. Take your full dose of antibiotics, people. This happened to a colleague, except he lay for 4 days semi-conscious on the floor of his house until another colleague went to look for him. He very nearly died. That is terrifying. Good on your other colleague for going to check on him. Man, now I have a new fear. Incredible imagery. I met a guy who had been traveling Australia with a couple friends, hitchhiking around as many of us had done. One of his friends told him they were near his distant uncle's house, whom he'd never met before. He got a phone number from a family member and as they had hoped, the uncle offered them a place to stay. He picked them up in town and drove them out to his rural property way out in the bush. They said he seemed like a pretty normal guy, friendly and cheery. When it was time to set up a place to sleep the uncle took them to a closet that was totally full of sleeping bags and bedrolls. They didn't think much of it at the time and all grabbed a kit and set up on the living room floor. They stayed a couple days and nothing out of the ordinary happened, and afterwards the uncle drove them to the bus station and they continued on their way. About a year later that man was arrested and charged with several counts of murder. He was the man who was picking up young hitchhiking backpackers and slaughtering them. The guy who told me this story was 100% certain he had slept in the sleeping bag of one of his victims. I guess he didn't kill the guys cause one of them was his nephew? Or because people knew they were there. This is probably THR only reason they are still alive. Classic nepotism. For real, nepotism runs rampant in the serial killer community. It really needs to stop. When I was about 8 years old our school was doing swimming lessons as part of the curriculum. My mum worked late, so we went to after school care and didn't get home until after dark. When we got home mum asked me to take my wet togs, bathing suit, and towel out to the clothesline to dry so I could use them the next day. I was so confident going outside to do this and had this real feeling of being a big kid. I walked into our backyard, only for a man to be running at me. I screamed, jumped inside and instinctively locked the back door as I did so. As this was happening, my mum told me she heard the guy jump the gate which was next to her bedroom just after she heard me scream and came running to find me. I slept with the light on until I was 16 and I get my husband to go outside for me while it's dark. What the frick? Yeah, it was pretty terrifying and obviously impacted me for life. The cops believe the guy was trying to break into our shed and I had startled him when I opened the back door. I don't think he was expecting a little kid to walk out. I'm not sure what it is about this story that I find so damn unsettling, but geez, no wonder it impacted you. I'd be scared forever. Lived W3 other girls sophomore year of college. All 3 took off early for spring break, leaving me alone in the house. First night alone, I heard someone bang on my front door at 2 a.m. Then I hear more knocks at the back door. A man yells "Boulder police, open the door." When I didn't, I heard body slams against both doors. Soon I hear "Little girl, open the door, we know you're alone." At this point I'm so scared I keep accidentally dialing 611 instead of 911. When I eventually do get the police, cars roll up, thankfully, just minutes later. Officers have 4 boys from our school hockey team face down on the grass. I had to file restraining orders against them, and the kicker, one lived across the street from me and we'd never spoken a single word before then. Holy shoot. What was the aftermath? What happened to them? I was in class in 10th grade and the teacher was asking everyone how their weekend was. The quietest girl in the class spoke and while breaking down in tears said she was on a trip in the mountains with her mom. They made a stop for some reason and she looked over the cliff and saw an overturned vehicle with a dead family scattered about. I recently saw an accident where the man was getting chest compressions in the middle of the highway. I really regret looking. I just keep picturing how much his chest was depressing, knowing his ribs were breaking. I was driving home from work one afternoon and came across an accident. I was one of the first people there. I got out of my car and ran over. Broken glass everywhere and there was a limp body hanging out of the driver's side window and a puddle of blood collecting under his head. I called the police, but they were just pulling up as I did. They asked me to leave, but I never found out if the driver made it. A bit of a traumatizing experience. One time my mum came across an accident on her way home from work. 2 semis had crashed into each other, completely squashed together. It just looked like a normal accident and both drivers seemed fine as the police and ambulance had arrived. She didn't think too much of it until she turned on the news that night. There had been a car between them, and the driver was one of my brother's teachers. Back in the 70s, some friends and I planned a camping trip to Northern Cali for a long weekend. We packed up and headed north on the highway. Somewhere around Bakersfield we picked up a hitchhiker headed to Kernville, who we dropped off before heading further north. So we get to our campsite and start getting things set up. My girlfriend finds a note tucked into the top of her backpack. It read, "I could have killed all of you. None of us slept that night." Maybe he was just warning you against picking up random hitchhikers. Probably. I used to be someone who stopped to help people on the side of the road. Mainly because I was stranded on the side of the highway, 10 miles from the nearest exit, and I swore that if anyone stopped to help me, I'd do the same for others. Someone did stop, so I kept my promise. Had a few grateful people over the years. More often, as cell phones became a thing, people's answer would be that they're fine. Someone is on the way. Sometimes they need a jump start or something. As I got older, I realized how stupid that was. I'm an unarmed solo woman traveler. Ted Bundy would have loved my dumbass. Luckily now, with cell phones, it is rare that someone is truly stranded, so I don't have any guilt about driving past. Then I read a story about a grandmother and her 5-year-old granddaughter who were raped and beaten to death, all while the people laughed at them for being stupid enough to help them. And that was the end for me. Horrible nightmares from that story. Just horrible. Okay, that last paragraph is just all sorts of fricked up. There have been several confirmed cases in a few different countries of people living in other people's houses unbeknownst to them. I believe one case went on for a couple of years. The intruder would wait until the homeowner would go to work and then sneak out and steal small amounts of food as not to be noticed. Well, eventually the homeowner did notice and couldn't figure out where his food was going, so he set up a hidden camera to record it. I can only imagine how scary it would have been to come home from work one night and sit down to watch the video, skipping through hours of stillness, to suddenly come across a person crawling out of your attic. And then the slow realization that that person is still in your house at that moment. And then the retroactive fear of thinking back to all the times you laid awake at night and heard a noise, which you just dismissed as coming from the pipes or the old wooden beams, but actually it was a freaking person just above you. It gives me the heebie-jeebies every time I think about it. If anyone is staying in someone's attic right now waiting for them to leave, they are fricked, because no one is leaving their house often anymore. Now I'm just thinking of someone waking up to the stench of death in their home and finding someone who starved to death in their attic or walls since they couldn't come out for food. Bro, I'd see what happens. I would break out of the attic and run right past someone sitting on their couch before I sat up there and starved to death, lol. I would just straight up come down and be like, so, here's the sitch, and hope they were very welcoming, understanding people. One of my friends was drugged by a nice seeming girl at a bar that tried to Shrek's traffic her. The girl got her an Uber to an address she didn't know under the guise of get my drunk friend home, but she woke up on the way and told the driver she didn't know where they were going. They called the cops. Apparently that wasn't the first time that week they'd heard the same story, and they recognized the address as one they were already tracking. If she hadn't woken up on the way, she might have been trafficked by now. Apparently they use younger, safe seeming girls to do the collecting a lot of the time. Was at a bar with my friend and got up to go to the bathroom. Took like 15 minutes to get back to her because of how long the line was, and when I get back, she was completely surrounded by this group of people I had never seen before, mainly girls and maybe one or two guys. I walked up and they all gave me a look that wasn't friendly, but acted welcoming. I noticed my friend had a new drink and was suddenly much more intoxicated than when I left her, so I started saying I needed to go, because I had work in the morning. The group tried to tell me to just go and she would be fine. I said no and dragged her out of the bar and started walking her home. She pretty much blacked out on the way home and I had to drag her. Luckily her neighbors were outside and came over and helped me get her inside. My friend didn't remember anything about that night and was so sick the next day. We are both convinced that group roofied her. Sounds exactly like what happened to me at a bar, and I'm a guy. Friends dragged me out of there, but I passed out after only having a few beers and pissed myself, and the police were phoned once I woke up a full 36 hours later. They got footage of the people at the bar, but not good enough to identify anyone, and no witnesses ever came forward except for my friends. I was really young too, like 19. Legal drinking age in Alberta is 18, so I was not familiar with the bar culture. Very, very scary experience. You're a good friend, homie. Not quite as bad, but when I was at uni, my friend and I were going to a club because they were offering free shots. On the way there we got intercepted by two girls and a man. The man didn't speak to us and hung back, whilst the girls convinced us to come with them to a different club. We were quite resistant as we wanted to go where we were planning to go, but the girls were very insistent that we should go with them, because the guy was loaded and would pay for us to get in and buy all our drinks. At the door the guy did pay, and his wallet was stuffed with cash. When we got inside, my friend and I had no chance to speak to each other before the girls took her to the dance floor and told me to go to the bar with this man. He grabbed my hand and took me over to the bar. I was getting uneasy. He still hadn't spoken at all, except to ask what we'd drink. I said single vodka and soda. Jay ordered doubles. He didn't get himself the other two girls' drinks. Uneasiness intensifies. I say I want to find my friend, and the guy suddenly gets very chatty and very handsy, telling me to stay with him and telling me he has loads of money and will treat me like a princess all evening. I'm stood holding two drinks, getting more and more concerned about where my friend is and why we've been split up. Managed to get away, unsure how now. Maybe I went to the toilet, I don't remember. I do remember getting onto the dance floor and tipping both drinks into the corner and frantically trying to find my friend. I went out to the smoking section. She didn't smoke, but I thought maybe she'd think I'd go out there so I might find her. I saw some guys who I knew, asked if they'd seen my friend, and explained the situation. I joked it felt like we were going to get sold into the Shrek's trade. The guys laughed, but said that genuinely, it did sound dodgy as frick and we should find my friend ASAP. Our conversation was disturbed by someone launching the smoking section door open so hard it clattered on the wall. My friend stormed out screaming that I abandoned her and the girls were trying to make her go back to a house outside of the city near the red light district, and she was certain they were going to sell her into the Shrek's trade. Had she not managed to ditch them? We joke about it now, but the fact we both thought the same thing despite not having discussed it at the time makes me think we absolutely were at risk.